Increasing the lifespan of your well should be one of your top priorities. Calling Hydro Resources is the easy solution to do just that. Since the 1940s as Hinkle Drilling and 1999 as Hydro Resources, they have been providing groundwater service and solutions to ag producers, municipalities, and more. Whether it's well drilling and construction, pumping system design and installation, controls, pump services and maintenance, or well services and rehabilitation, Hydro Resources is the answer. Find out more information at hydroresources.com. With locations in Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas, they have a wide service area, so let them help you with your groundwater needs today.
Welcome to the Hydro Resources Community Brunch on Dry River Radio. Each week we visit a different community in southwest Kansas to see what they have going on. If you miss a part of the show, no problem. Visit our Facebook or YouTube pages or even our website at dryriverservices.com. Now for your Hydro Resources Community Brunch, here's your host, Joey Dean.
And welcome to our third Hydro Resources Community Brunch. I'm Joey Dean, and we're here at Milk and Honey at the flight deck at the Garden City Regional Airport, and we have the pleasure of talking with Representative Pat Proctor. And how are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are.
Yeah, so I represent and serve the people of Leavenworth and Fort Leavenworth in the Kansas House, and I serve all Kansans as the chairman of the House Elections Committee. And I'm running to continue to serve Kansas as the next Secretary of State.
How do you go from serving just one portion of Kansas to serving the entirety of the state?
Yeah, so, when you get elected as a representative, they ask you what committees do you want to be on. And I said what anybody from Leavenworth would say. I said I want to be on the Military and Veterans Committee, I want to be on the Corrections Committee. And they put me on the Elections Committee. And so I'm like, well, if I'm going to be on the Elections Committee, I better know everything there is to know about elections. And so I made an appointment with Secretary of State's office. I spent the whole day with the elections team there, just great professionals, and they were just going soup to nuts, everything there was to know about elections. The whole time I was in there, my phone was just blowing up. I was just getting text after text and call after call. And I'm going to be rude, because how often am I going to have all these great professionals in one room just feeding my brain? So I kind of put my phone away, but when I was done, I stepped out there on the sidewalk and next to Memorial Hall, right in front of the Capitol. I remember it like it was yesterday, and I looked down at my phone. And the day I'd been in there learning everything there was to learn about elections was January 6, 2021.
Oh, wow.
So while I'd been in there learning everything there was to learn about elections, everything that had happened on January 6th has happened. It just sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. You know, I had a lot of ideas about what I was going to be doing in the legislature, and I did some of that. You know, working on bringing back historic downtowns. I passed a bill called the Historic Kansas Act to encourage investment. But I was going to be doing all that, but the most important thing I was going to be working on was restoring confidence in our elections. And so after a couple of years when I came back and I'm a sophomore, I'm no longer a freshman legislator, and they said, what do you want to do in leadership? I didn't hesitate. I said, I want to be the chairman of the Elections Committee, because we have a crisis in the state and in this country of voter confidence. There are a lot of people, they've just given up on the process. They've given up on elections. They no longer believe that elections reflect their will. And I've been in places. I was 25 years in the Army. I was in Iraq and Afghanistan. I know what it looks like when people stop trusting the ballot box and civil processes. You get what we had last week with Charlie Kirk. People start shooting each other over their differences. And I swore an oath. It didn't end when I took off the uniform in 2019. And so I wanted to be a part of fixing this problem. I want to bring people back into the process so we can have full participation in our elections, and everybody can trust that their votes counted and that only valid votes are counted.
I've been interviewing politicians and civic leaders for going on 9 years now out here in southwest Kansas, and one thing that has come up a number of times is voting. And especially a few years back, after COVID, there was
all this fear about going to polling places and whatever. And Dodge City had a huge deal because they moved their polling place to the south side of the tracks, and people were going to have trouble getting there. And I live in Ingalls. And so, well, all these people are complaining about going to the south side of the tracks. I have to drive to Cimarron to vote. It's 6 miles one way, and so it's an aged community a little bit in Ingalls. There's some older people that live there and going to have to make that drive. And so, is there anything to help ease that burden a little bit on voters? Anything that can be done to help that out?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in Kansas, we've got a pretty robust early voting system, so you don't have to go, on election day to your polling place between 7 a.m. 7 p.m. You can go to one of the early voting sites in your county, wherever that is. We have mail-in balloting without a reason now. You don't have to have a doctor's note to mail and vote. Anybody can apply for an advance mail ballot and can mail vote. But I think, while we're doing that, we've got to make it easy to vote, but we got to make it hard to cheat. Those mail-in ballots have to be as secure as if you were standing in a voting booth at the polling place and casting a vote in person. And so that's a lot of what I've been working on, because there is a lot of concern about mail-in ballots after kind of all of the stuff that was out there in 2020. And so a lot of what I've been working on is making sure that no matter how you decide to vote, because there are a lot of options here in Kansas, it's going to be equally secure, and we can be equally assured that that vote is free and fair.
I've heard a lot of controversy over having to have a real ID to vote. Explain to us how that's more beneficial in securing voting.
So the real ID proves that you are who you say you are. And so you have to provide a birth certificate, you have to provide a passport, you have to provide something that shows that you are who you say you are, and then you have to present that at the polling place. If you're getting a mail-in ballot, you have to put the real ID number on the request to get the ballot. So that's how we know that we're sending the ballot to who we're supposed to be, or that you are the person you say you are when you come to vote, and that you're valid to vote in that district. Something that's of concern that I heard over and over again when because I'm the elections chair, everybody comes to me with their concerns, is about non-citizen voting. And so I dug into it because I'm trying to address people's concerns so we can bring those people with concerns back in the process. The first thing I discovered is, did you know that it's actually nowhere in Kansas statute and nowhere in our Constitution in Kansas that you have to be a citizen to vote?
Oh, wow.
Because it was so obvious that nobody ever thought to write it down. So I'm like, hey, that's low-hanging fruit. So I sponsored this last session, I sponsored a constitutional amendment. It's going to be on the ballot in November 2026. I encourage everybody to go out and vote for it. That just says, very simply, only citizens can vote in the state of Kansas. So it'll be clear in our statute. But once you put that in statute, you have to enforce it. And so I dug a little more, and did you know that you don't have to be a citizen to get a real ID either, which is where I was going with this. You have to prove you are who you said you are, and if you're a non-citizen, you have to prove that you're in the country legally. And that could be a green card, that you've had for 10 years, or that could be, 2 years ago I filled out Joe Biden's CBP1 app, and I got to America, and now they flew me to Kansas, and now I'm legal. So they're issuing those real IDs to non-citizens. And when I dug a little further, what I found was that 6 times in the last 15 years, the Secretary of State has gotten the DMV to give them that data, for who's a non-citizen, so they could scrub the voter rolls. And the last time was in November of last year. They found 80 non-citizens on the voter roll, and they think 20 of them voted, but they're not sure. They're still investigating. So it does happen. And I don't think there's a vast conspiracy to let non-citizens vote in the state of Kansas. I think that clerk at the DMV 500 times a day asks, do you want to register to vote? Because she has to, because of the National Voter Registration Act. And sometimes she asks the wrong person. So what we did this year is we passed a law that every quarter the DMV has to provide a list of the non-citizens that they gave driver's licenses to, so the Secretary of State can scrub the voter rolls. And it's not, like I said, it's not about stopping some vast conspiracy. It's about being able to tell Kansans that have concerns that their votes being diluted by non-citizens' votes. No, they're not, because we scrub the voter rolls every quarter to make sure that non-citizens don't get on the voter rolls.
There's a lot of a lot of stuff out there on the internet, of course. Some of it's not true, some of it is true, some of it's partially true. The biggest one I saw in recent years has been dealing with women and their right to vote. Women that get married and change their name, but they haven't changed it yet on their ID and this and that, and so they have to bring like 17 forms of ID and a blood sample and everything else to the voting place. Is that true?
Yeah, it's not. And you know what I would say about all of that stuff is as important as addressing people's concerns is hearing people's concerns. You know, I hate to keep going back to tragic event, but Charlie Kirk, you know, the reason that people loved him is because he created a platform where people could talk.
Right.
And he wouldn't shout people down, he'd let them talk, and then he would give his side. And so something I tried to do in my committee room since I've been the chairman of the elections committee is turn it into a platform for conversation. Sometimes I'll tee up something I have absolutely no intention of running, but I know it's going to get people fired up enough to come in and talk to us about their concerns. And then we just let them talk. You know, I may not agree with their concerns, and if I don't agree with their concerns, I'm going to push back respectfully and civilly. I'm going to say, hey, did you know that, you know, we pull out all the paper ballots and we do an audit and we hand count to make sure it matches, you know, whatever their concern is. And a lot of times they're like, wow, I didn't know we did that, you know, and I'm not as concerned now. And but sometimes I agree with their concerns, and I guarantee you the other side won't agree with their concerns, and they'll push back, but we're having a conversation. And I think that the best way to engage all of these concerns is to have a conversation. And if it's a valid concern and we can fix it without it making it harder to vote, and it doesn't cost a gajillion dollars, let's just fix it. Let's have the courage to fix it. But we need to hear people out, and we need to hear their concerns, not shout them down, not call them names. It's kind of crazy. A lot of my committee hearings are viral videos now, you know, YouTube videos of committee hearings. But like, people are just so hungry for people to have a civil discussion about elections instead of a shouting match, which is what we've been doing for the last 5 years. So I, you know, if I'm Secretary of State, I want to take that statewide. I want to go on the road show. You know, let's bring, you know, let's meet people where they are, hear their concerns, and talk to them. And maybe they got a valid concern and we can fix it, or maybe they just don't understand a piece of the process and we can educate. So I think there's a ton of stuff out there. And I love when people contact me. I love when people talk to me about the concerns, because a lot of times the concerns just come from a place where people don't understand the whole process.
So what is the process for women that have changed their name and all that?
Yeah, so if you have a driver's license and the name doesn't match the registration name, you can change your registration, right? You can either update your driver's license and bring it in, or bring in the driver's license before. We're not talking on election day, we're talking, you know, during the other, you know, 23 and a half months that you're allowed to register. You can bring that material in and you can register to vote before the election with the correct name. If you show up at the polling place and you display an ID and it doesn't match the name that's on the registration, you have the right to vote. You tell them, I want to vote, I am a valid voter. They give you what's called a provisional ballot, which is a ballot that they just don't run through the machine, they put it to the side. So you vote that ballot, they put it in a little envelope, they write like name on ID, didn't match voter registration, and then you've got like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on your county, before the canvass to just bring in the stuff to show them that, like, look, you know, I changed my name. They'll update your registration right then and they'll mark that ballot counted, and then when the canvass happens, they count the ballot.
Yeah, my wife actually went through that a couple of years ago, and it's not really that difficult of a process, but I wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to tell people.
No, I appreciate that, and that's why I love doing this, because people hear these things like, well, I changed my name, I can't vote this year. No, go vote, please go vote. We'll fix it. You know, there are processes to adjudicate, because, you know, the whole system is geared towards due process, because, you know, it says it doesn't say only citizens can vote in the Constitution right now, but it does say every citizen can vote. If you're a valid voter, every citizen can vote. The only way you can have your voting rights taken away is if you're convicted of a crime, and then as soon as you serve your sentence, you can vote again. As soon as you're no longer serving your sentence or on probation, you can vote again. Everybody can vote. It's your right, it's your duty, and we want everybody to vote. So I appreciate you giving me the kind of platform to make sure people know that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because years ago I lived in Ashland, Kansas, which is a town of now about 600 people. There was probably about 900 then. But when you move from one house to another in a small town like that, you don't think about changing your ID or going and getting a new driver's license or anything. And I was probably 22. And I went in to vote, and I had a different address, and I had to fill out a provisional ballot. And of course, everybody there knows who you are anyway. So they're like, "Why didn't you just update it?" Well, I didn't think about that. So even little things like that, but I was still able to vote.
And I love that, like, it's we don't just like, oh yeah, I know you, come on in and here's your ballot, Bill. I mean, they're dotting the I's and they're crossing the T's because those poll workers understand the gravity of what it is they're doing. I mean, you're in a way exercising a substitute for force. I mean, we're sort of unique in world history. Before us, kings and queens and people, they seized power through guns and force. And you're really sort of exercising political force when you do that vote. And so we've got to be very careful about who we let wield that force, and that everybody gets that equal chance and that equal voice. And so I love that our poll workers, they dot the I's and cross T's. I was, I was just out in Ulysses. I met with the county clerk today, Anita, and she's brand new. She just got elected, and she's going to be doing her first election here in November. And I was just like, it really heartened me how conscientious she was, and how she wanted to dot every I and cross every T and make sure that every rule is followed. She's tell a story. She woke up in the middle of the night when she heard I was running for Secretary of State. She says, "Oh my God, he's not on the ballot!" And then she realized, "Oh yeah, it's 2026." So I mean, just that really encourages me that the people that we have running our elections, they really understand how important what they do is.
We're talking with Pat Proctor, representative, and we're here at the Milk and Honey at the flight deck on your Hydro Resources Community Brunch. You said you had never been to this place before. It's really nice, huh?
This is a beautiful place. And me and my wife own a couple of restaurants. We've got a restaurant in Leavenworth and one in Manhattan. That's what kind of held my family here. And I know how hard it is to put together any restaurant, but a restaurant inside an airport, I imagine there's all these things I can't even think of, these additional challenges, and for them to put together such a beautiful place, I'm looking forward to eating here.
It's fantastic that I brought the wife and kid. It's been here quite a while, and I never got the chance to come out here, because how often do you really go to the airport and go to the city? But I was talking with Matt Allen a couple weeks ago, and the wife and I were like, well, what do we want to do for dinner? And I said, you know what, let's just go out there and check this place out. I had to come out and get some video of the airport anyway, and it was fantastic food. The people that own this actually owned a place called Pinky's before. It was a sandwich shop that was down in town, and it was fantastic. And they ended up moving here and then changing things up to a little more classy than what Pinky's was, but still great food and great people as well.
Now, this is my second time in Garden City since I announced, but I have never flown in here. I think it's really important that you make the trip. And I try to stop a lot of places along the way, so I've never flown into the airport. So I'm glad that you did the interview here, because otherwise I would have never known this place is here. But we're staying here tonight. We might make a trip back down here to eat dinner. I don't know.
We'll see what happens. Definitely worth it. So outside of election things, what else does the Secretary of State take care of?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked the question, because everybody wants to talk about elections, because that's the sexy part of the office. So the business division in the Secretary of State's office is where everybody goes when they're going to start a corporation, start a company, because just about every company, just for tax purposes, you're either an LLC or an S Corp or C Corp, and that's where everybody goes. And when I started my first little 19-seat restaurant in Leavenworth outside the front gate, thank God my wife knew a lot about running a restaurant, but neither one of us knew anything about starting a business. And a lot of times we would discover that we hadn't done something when we got a letter from a state agency saying you didn't do this. And unfortunately, sometimes it came with a fine because you hadn't filed in time. And so I think that's a really missed opportunity for the state of Kansas. I would love to turn that office and that website into an entrepreneurship engine. A couple things I'd like to do with that office. First of all, wouldn't it be great if the Secretary of State's business division had 1 or 2 people in it who had ever started or run a business?
That'd be
so
ideal.
You could pick up a phone and you could call them and say, hey, I've got a question, and they would know the answer, because they had done it, they had lived it. But also, a former Secretary of State, before he left office, he didn't have time to do it, but he was working on legislation that I'm going to try to get done this year so that I can implement it as Secretary of State, that shifts the burden. Because right now the burden is, if you want to start a restaurant like this one, I wouldn't, because this is already beautiful, but if you want to start a restaurant here in Garden City, the burden is on you as the business owner to know all the regulations, and if you don't, they fine you. This bill would shift the burden from the business owner to the state agency. It's the state agency's job to notify you that all of these requirements are placed on you to have that kind of business.
Kind of like a checklist.
Exactly. And I'd love them to populate a database, and I know a database in the corner of a website is no better than a statute in a statute book or a regulation, but the idea is they populate a database, and then what I'd like to do is I'd like to AI enable that website. So there's the little window where you type your corporation name to see if it's taken, and if it's not, file your corporation. Right under that, I'd like to put a little chat window that says, what kind of business do you want to start where? And you could put, I want to start a restaurant in Garden City, or I want to start a feedlot in Garden City, or I want to start a gas station in Garden City. And it would go to that database, and then it would go to the federal database, and then it would go to all the whatever city website, wherever you're going to start, and it would just spit out to you, these are all the things you got to do. A little checklist with links that you click, and now you've got a checklist of everything you got to do. And so instead of finding out when you get the enforcement letter, you can find out the day that you file your corporation that you also have to do those other things.
That'd be really handy.
Yeah. I wish they had had AI when I was starting my business back in 2006.
We're talking with Representative Pat Proctor here on your Hydro Resources Community Brunch. So there's the business side, there's the elections side. Is there anything else that is encompassed there?
I'm glad you asked again, because I could go on about this all day. But so the Secretary of State is sort of the clerk for the state. We got a county clerk for the county that does all of this kind of record keeping for the county. Well, the Secretary of State does all kinds of these arcane things, like it's the publisher for the state, so any publications are published by the Secretary of State's office. But there's all these weird nooks and crannies, like all the lobbyists that are in the Capitol, they have to wear these gold badges so we know they're lobbyists, so we can run away from them. And but they file at it used to be the Ethics Commission, now it's the Commission on Public Disclosure. They file there, but then they go to the Secretary of State's office to get their little gold badge. Why do we have to have a guy at the Secretary of State's job office whose only job is to hand out gold badges? Why can't we just shift that to the people who file, where they file with, and then they can just go there and get their gold badge, and then I can eliminate a full-time job, and we can do something else with that money. There's a lot of little things like that. When if you're a candidate and you're filing for your campaign finance report, it goes to the Public Disclosure Commission, but you file at the Secretary of State's website. Why is that? Why can't we just shift that to them? They run it. We can get rid of the person, the money that we're spending to do that out of the Secretary of State's office. I hate to say this, but I have spent a lifetime in government, not as an elected official, but I was 25 years in the Army, and now I'm a professor at Wichita State in the Homeland Security Program, which is a state job. You get paid by the state, and I've been in state government here for the last 5 years as a legislator. I know how it works, right? Like, people up there, they judge their importance by how many people are in their office. Well, you know what? I'm happy not being an important person, so let's get rid of as many positions as we have to get rid of to be as streamlined as efficient. And if something makes more sense in another office, let's send it there. And I'm a Republican, so I'm hoping that we have a Republican governor that would be able to work with me so that we can figure out how we can make the whole government more efficient. I'd like to make my little corner of the government in the Secretary of State's office just as lean and mean as I possibly can.
You mentioned having a Republican governor. Right now we've got a Democrat governor in Laura Kelly. And how is that dynamic in Topeka when it comes to trying to work with the governor's office and trying to work with the House or the Senate or whatever?
You know, we cooperate where we can cooperate, and where we have to have an argument, we have an argument, and hopefully we do it civilly. You know, the legacy media, which you're not, the legacy media wants to focus on the fights. And so if you were to watch TV here in Garden City, you know, KSN News or whatever, and all you're ever going to see is you're going to see the fights. You're going to see where we split along party lines and we got up there and gave fiery speeches and shook our fists, because it's great TV and it sells advertisement on TV. What I try to take as many of my constituents as I possibly can up to Topeka to see how it actually happens. I bring them right on the House floor while we're doing stuff. I get them a little, you know, pass so they can stay on the House floor and see us talking. And 80-90% of the votes, 95% of the votes are like 125 to nothing, or 124 to 1, because there's always one guy, right? but they're you know, we're cooperating because we all understand what's best for Kansas. And a lot of things aren't red and blue. A lot of things are rural and urban. You know, they split along those lines. And so I think that it's a lot less contentious on most things. It's just all of the attention goes to those things where we disagree. And unfortunately, a lot of those things are my election bills, because there is a disagreement that because of the shouting match that's happening outside my committee room. People feel like they have to dig in and entrench, and we can't meet in the middle on things. This year, we had a bill to end the 3-day grace period. We used to, for 3 days after the election, if your mail-in ballot showed up, we'd go ahead and count it. And that sounds like a good idea, mail's slow. But when I go around to all the clerks all over the state, even before I was running for Secretary of State, as the chairman of the election committee, I need to talk to the election officers that are actually having to suffer through the laws we pass. And what they were telling me is these ballots show up after election day, and we can only count like 2 and 3 of them because they don't get postmarked. And if they're not postmarked before election day, you don't know when they were cast. You can't, by law, you can't count them. And so I tried to meet in the middle with folks and like figure out a compromise. Maybe put more days on the back end, on the front end for mail-in voting, because we're taking some days. And I had a deal all worked out. We were still working out the microscopic stuff, but the ACLU and me and League of Women Voters, we're working together. That's words I never thought I would say before I tried it, but we were working together. But then these groups, I call them the Axis Ballot Harvesting. They're funded by George Soros and foreign billionaires, and their job is to raise money to blow up cooperation, because they raise money by the fight. They don't raise money by meeting in the middle on stuff. And they came in and they blew up the whole deal. And I tried to pass it without them, and I couldn't even get my own caucus to all go for it, because I was given stuff on the front end. And so it's really depressing. You wanna work together, but there are groups that their only objective is raising money, and they raise money on the argument. They don't raise money on compromise and solutions. And so this year we were able to press those things through over their objections, but they weren't as bipartisan as they would have been. And so I'm going to try. I've got one more year in the legislature. I'm going to try to do those things. I'm going to try to give people more time on the front end. There's some things that we got to fix with early voting that are really crushing rural clerks, like that Monday of early voting up to noon. Of course, everybody waits till 11:55 and the line's out the county door, and it crushes those folks that are like 2-man shops or 2-lady shops. They have to let all those people vote before they can start setting up polling places, tens of miles away. And so I'm going to try to get some of those things done. But the problem is legislators don't like to vote on election laws on election years, because you have these groups on the outside that use it as a fundraising mechanism. Oh, they're trying to suppress the vote. They're trying to steal the election. And that's why it's so hard to get stuff done in Topeka. It's not the legislators. It's all those folks that sort of profit on the argument instead of on the solution.
I'm talking with Representative Pat Proctor here on your Hydro Resources Community Brunch. So I've had the opportunity to talk with a whole bunch of candidates. I've also Representative Wheeler, Senator Dahl, Governor Kelly on a number of occasions.
Wow.
And one thing that we always end up talking about, both on the air and off the air, is about the importance of local government from the state level down. Everybody, the glamour of the presidential election and red versus blue and all that nonsense, the chaos that is. You spoke of legacy media and how much they push that division. You have that division at the state level, but it's not as nasty, I guess, or it's not always as nasty.
I need to bring it to my district.
Level. But how important is it for politics and government at the local level or the state level versus what you deal with on a daily basis versus the national level?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm in a really contentious district. I'm one of the toughest Republican districts in the state. I'm the first Republican reelected there since 1994, and I just did the three-peat. So they just get madder the more I win the other side. So, but when I'm out, I have to knock doors. I mean, my district, I have all of Fort Leavenworth, and they don't vote in Kansas. They vote in Texas and Florida because they don't have income tax. And then I've got the U.S. Penitentiary, and they don't vote anywhere. 1,400 guests of the federal government, and so half my district doesn't vote in Kansas or doesn't vote at all. So like every vote counts, and every vote counts everywhere. But every vote counts double in my district because there's half as many voters. So I go to every door. I have met every voter in my district. Literally everybody who votes in my district, I've met them. And when I go to the door, everybody right now, the topic is property taxes. Everybody wants to talk about property. I agree. I'm a business owner. I've got rental properties that I rent out. We get killed on property taxes. But it drives me nuts because when I go to their door, I'm using the voter roll. And on the copy I have, I can see what elections they voted in because you want to knock the ones that vote the most first. You got to prioritize. And I'm standing there talking to somebody who's complaining about their property taxes, and I look at the voter list. They didn't vote in any of the odd year elections where all of the city commission races are and where all the school board races are, which determines 75% of their property taxes. And then the other 25% is the county. It's still not the state. So everything everything about your property taxes is determined at the local level, and we all agree that it's too high, yet voters are not voting in the local elections. And so I did some stuff this year to kind of eat at the edges of the problem. Like, a lot of times, not that it's nefarious, but cities or schools, when they need a bond or they need a sales tax, they will put the election like 2 weeks after New Year's, mail ballot only, because they know the only people who are going to vote for it are the people who want it. Everybody's going, I don't want a bond I don't want a bond, and they'll throw away the ballot. Right. And so this year we there's only 3 days in a year when you can do a special election. The first Tuesday in March, or primary election day, or general election day. So that will knock off some of that nonsense. But what I'd really like to do to get at this problem is I'd like to move all of our elections to the even year. Because in the odd year, you get like 9 to 19%. In the even year, depending on whether it's a presidential or a midterm, you get like 50 to 60, 70%. And so if we move all the elections to the even year, we'll get more participation on all those down ballot races, the cities. And I hear all the complaints, because nasty secret, the Kansas Association of School Boards and the Kansas National Education Association and the Kansas League of Municipalities, they represent these local governments. They don't really want participation in the elections, because if everybody participates and holds the elected officials at the local level accountable, they won't raise property taxes, and all these organizations won't get as much money because the property taxes pay the association fees for those organizations. So I would like to move all the elections to the even year. A little more controversial, I would like to make all the elections partisan, because the other challenge is you've got, out in Ulysses, they're going to have 8 people on the ballot for 3 positions in the city government, and that none of them have an R or a D next to their name. So if you don't know those people and you didn't do your research, you don't know anything about them. At least the RRD tells you something about them. I mean, it's it's not determinative. We're both big tents, but at least it tells you something about them. And so I would like to do that before I leave the legislature. And if I can't, like I said, legislators don't like to vote on election bills in election years, but I'm at least going to have the hearing on it. So the next year, 2027, when I come back, God willing, as this Kansas Secretary of State, that will be my legislative agenda to get all those elections. It also has all kinds of other benefits, like it'll be cheaper when we only do half as many elections for the counties, so maybe they can lower the property taxes a little bit because they only have to pay for half as many elections. So there's a lot of ancillary benefits to it, but it's probably going to be a multi-year project that I'd like to continue to work on as Secretary of State.
We'll wrap things up here with Representative Pat Proctor here on Hydro Resources Community Brunch. There's been a bunch of Secretary of States over the years. Why are you different? Why are you more qualified to be in that position?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of different kind of looks at what a Secretary of State could be like in the last few years, different personalities in the job. I think what I bring to the job that maybe some of those folks didn't bring to the job, and it's not an indictment on anybody else, I'm just a different person. I have not been in politics my whole life, and as a matter of fact, if you'd told me 10 years ago that I would be sitting here running for Kansas Secretary of State, I would have laughed in your face because I was probably in Afghanistan time or someplace, I don't know, somewhere in the world being a soldier. I think there's a lot of benefit in bringing somebody who's not a lifelong elected official, not a lifelong politician, and a public servant into this job. I bring a breadth of experience. People don't think about it, but elections is a critical infrastructure for Homeland Security. And I've got a lot of experience working with Homeland Security in the practical sense as a soldier in the later half of my career, and then as an academic with the Homeland Security program at Wichita State that I teach at when I'm not in the legislature. I've got kind of the academic background, and I think that it's time that we looked at securing our elections as a security problem. I'm also a business owner. Like I said, I've got 2 restaurants in Leavenworth and Manhattan, and I think we need a business owner sitting on top of that business division to make it businessman friendly instead of elected government or government friendly. And so I think that that's a different look that I could bring to the office, and I think it's great that every few years we change secretaries of state and you get different people with different backgrounds and different priorities into the office to kind of shore up this section or shore up that section, or just look at the job and look at the office with a different set of eyes. And I think that's what I bring.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come talk with us, and enjoy your time here in Western Kansas.
I always do.
It's we've got all these trees here that you got to navigate, all the water you got to cross. It's just
God's
crazy
country.
out
This
here.
is God's country, and I love being out here.
I play music, and so I travel all over the state and into Oklahoma and Nebraska. We'll be going to South Dakota later in the year or next year.
Yeah.
And so I get to see all the different parts, and I just love coming home because I get left alone for the most part, and don't have to worry about traffic as much. Like, I lost my mind driving into Topeka a couple weeks ago. My temper was gone, and I was actually happy to come back and drive in Garden City.
Yeah,
so
25 years
nice.
in the Army, I've been all over the world. And when we came to Leavenworth in 2006, I knew right then that me and my wife were like, this is where we're going to retire. It just took a while to convince the Army of that, but so we always knew that this is where we were going to spend the rest of our lives. And I'm just, I love it here, and I can't think of any place else I'd want to live.
Well, we appreciate you talking with us, and we'll talk to you again soon, and good luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That is Representative Pat Proctor here on your Hydro Resources Community Brunch, right here from Milk and Honey at the flight deck in the Garden City Regional Airport. If you haven't come out here, make sure you come out, get some dinner, get some lunch. Check them out on Facebook. They have their menu and everything on Facebook, and I highly recommend you come out here. Until next time, this has been Hydro Resources Community Brunch.
Increasing the lifespan of your well should be one of your top priorities. Calling Hydro Resources is the easy solution to do just that. Since the 1940s as Hinkle Drilling and 1999 as Hydro Resources, They have been providing groundwater service and solutions to ag producers, municipalities, and more. Whether it's well drilling and construction, pumping system design and installation, controls, pump services and maintenance, or well services and rehabilitation, Hydro Resources is the answer. Find out more information at hydroresources.com. With locations in Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas, they have a wide service area, so let them help you with your groundwater needs today.
This has been the Hydro Resources Community Brunch on Dry River Radio. Join us next week to see what community we visit next. As always, you can catch up on episodes on our Facebook or YouTube pages or at dryriverservices.com.